Essentially, kickers are like golfers. You could play brilliant, kick 6 out of 8, and you come home and all you can think about is the 2 that you left behind.
Leona, what are your observations of Johnny Sexton?
That's a big question with him here. No, I mean, he's obviously one of the most decorated and respected Irish sportsmen there is. And one of the coolest things I think about our sports people in general, and Johnny's one of them, is the more successful they are, nearly the more humble they are. But you still walk into a room and they have a presence about them. And it's that sort of quiet confidence of, you know, they're very good at what they do, but they don't have to tell you about it or brag about it or things like that.
Would you agree with that?
I hope so. I'm happy that was said. I think you do see it in good sports people. I'm happy to be considered in that category.
Did I hear you once say you would have liked to have been a pro golfer?
Yeah, but remember we spoke about being realistic earlier? Yeah, from about, like I was obsessed with loads of sports, like golf being one of them. On my mum's side, my granddad was an international golfer, so he gave me his old clubs and showed me how to grip a club, and I became obsessed with it, like I do with most sports. So I played a lot of it as a kid, yeah.
When did your obsession with it all begin?
Started playing when about 9 or 10, I think. Like Johnny played sort of all sports growing up, and I think I had the benefit of having a twin sister that we were competitive with each other. I just wanted to beat her. It didn't matter what it was. If it was football or swimming or athletics or golf. Golf was different every day. There was a different challenge. The weather was different. The golf course was different. The greens were different speed. Some days you had good shots, some days you had bad shots. I think that's the beauty about golf for anybody at any level. It's one of the most frustrating games in the world. But at the same time, there's always that one shot that you hit that has a lovely strike, or you hold a putt, or whatever it is to just keep you coming back the next day.
Are you naturally a confident player? Did you have to work hard on things like self-belief, or was it just always there?
I think I'd probably be more confident as a golfer than as a person, probably. I think that confidence comes from your sport, and you sort of settle in and you're like, I can do this, I've done this hundreds of times in practice and whatever it is. I think that self-belief is knowing that you've done it over and over and over again.
Is that the same in your game?
Well, it's like, it's the preparation that you've done it so many times before, so your belief comes for me off the back of preparation, practice, having done it previously.
How long do you spend on your own out in a course?
8 to 10 hours, I think.
Really?
It varies depending on what type. We're getting ready for a big tournament, or if it's off-season work or whatever it is. But I think there's always that aspect of competitiveness. You're always, this is the shot, this is going to be the first tee at the Solheim Cup or the tournament or a major or whatever. You're always sort of simulating something, and that sort of puts the fun into it.
It's exactly the same thing with kicking. Like, we used to go to Gaelic pitches up the mountains to get away, and you put yourself in those positions in training, like practicing your drop goals, you're taking it to win the World Cup final. Essentially, kickers are like golfers. It's a one shot. That's why you can learn so much from people in other fields. Like meeting different sports people, it's invaluable over the years.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. The sports, like on paper, might be very, very different. Like Johnny said, he's there over the ball. That one kick, everybody's watching him. It's the same. For us, it's one putt. It either goes in or it doesn't.
In those moments, and you have it as well, what's going on inside your head?
I don't think you're thinking about the stakes at that point. I think it was interesting before the Solheim Cup a couple of years ago. I remember having quite a lengthy conversation with Paul McGinley about what to expect and the nerves, and it's going to be really loud. And the biggest thing I noticed was when the crowds were incredibly loud on the first tee, and then all of a sudden it just went dead silent. Most of it ends up being a blur in that moment. You don't have a whole lot of thoughts. A lot of it's just focusing on the target. I think routine is massively important. You do the same thing every time, that you're not taking any longer because it's an important shot. You're treating it the exact same if it's on the 5th hole on a Thursday versus the last putt to win on a Sunday. You have to sort of approach it the exact same way. That routine gives me a sort of sense of calmness in those moments.
So the repetition of the process.
Yeah.
That's you do.
Exact same.
You're nodding away in agreement with everything that's being said.
It's the exact same, yeah. We used to wear heart rate monitors the odd time. And for me, the heart rate, my highest heart rate was when the penalty was awarded. And then the routine just brought me right down, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a signal to your brain as well that this is what we do and this is how we do it, and it's yeah.
Yeah, I think for us one of the more important things is that walk between you hit one shot to the next shot. And I suppose unlike a lot of sports, we have caddies. I know me personally, like if things get a bit more important, maybe I start to walk quicker or things like that, and then that's where Dermot will maybe hand me a sandwich or a bottle of water just to sort of take you out of that thinking about the next shot until it's time to focus on the next shot.
Because we're comparing sports here, and in football commentary there's a thing we often say that thinking time is a bad thing. But you've got buckets of it.
Yeah. And I suppose that's where that inner self-talk becomes massively important. Like, are you sort of building yourself up walking to the next shot, or are you sort of dragging yourself down?
You're smiling and nodding away over there.
Being a golfer, being a kicker, you could play brilliant, you could kick 6 out of 8 and you come home and all you can think about is the 2 that you left behind, and sometimes it can cost the team, sometimes it won't, but like it's still what frustrates the life out of you. Like,
tell me about self-doubt. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, it always creeps in from time to time. There's always a question of those sort of what ifs, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I've gained so many spots in the world rankings as of late. I went from 170 in the world to 10th in the world. Sometimes I forget I'm 10th in the world. I'm still think I'm 170. It's like, oh, do I really deserve to be here? Am I really good enough to pull off these shots? That's where sometimes the caddy comes in and he'll always go, come on, be a hero. This is what we've practiced for, be a hero. Which usually means just get on with it. Stop questioning it, just get on with it. You can do it.
that was the thing I learned from the kick against New Zealand. I was standing there and I was unsure of the wind. Richie Murphy, who was the kicking coach at Ireland for years, if I just said to him, this is inside, he would just go, just bang it down the middle. But once you're aiming for something definite.
You mentioned sibling rivalry earlier. You have a sister who was just as competitive and hugely talented. So within your household, was it really competitive all the way up?
Competitive, but in a good way, I think. I mean, she was always better than me growing up. She was bigger, she was stronger, she hit it further. It was funny, a lot of the time, you come in off the course and you wouldn't look at the leaderboard, I'd just be like, what did Lisa shoot? Didn't care. I think the comparison was always tricky when people would, the first question would be, oh, how are you getting on and what's your sister up to? But I remember someone said to Dad one time, it was like, well, sure, at least there's a trophy coming home. And that's what Dad used to always say. It doesn't matter which one it was. At the time, you were like, I want it to be me. But you kind of had to come around to that mentality of, well, at least if it's not me, I'm glad it's her.
Were you good winners? Whoever won, were like, or would you rub it in?
I suppose that was the thing as well. You couldn't really probably enjoy it as well as much as, because it was like, well, I know she's there incredibly disappointed and I can't be all delighted with myself. I suppose golf being such an individual sport, we had a built-in sort of practice partner as well. Practice was always competitive. It was always, oh, well, if Lisa shot 70 today, well, I want to shoot 69. Or if I notice she's not up, well, I'll make sure I'm up and won't tell her where I'm going and I'll get a few extra reps in before she's even up. So just small things like that you didn't even think about at the time, but sort of all added up.
You've kind of a similar situation in your household growing up.
Yeah, so me and Mark were always competitive growing up. Like, Mark was a brilliant rugby player till 16, and then he got like one of the worst leg breaks you've ever seen. But he's been my number one supporter, and like he says, watching you play for Ireland was probably just as good. That's like literally,
really?
Yeah. And then when you hear that, you're like, oh, wow.
I think that's where you realise how incredibly lucky you are. My sister practiced just as hard as me. She got basically the same genetics as me, and a bit like Johnny's brother, she got a couple of bad wrist injuries that derailed her and she just never got quite back on track. And sometimes you do wonder, why me? But that's where the nice thing that I've got to share a lot of the journey with her. She caddied for me in Rio. We got to go to the Olympics. She was able to be a part of that whole experience. She was right there at the Solheim Cup. It's a very selfless thing for her as well, seeing her take so much joy in me doing well. Social
media comments, did they impact you?
Yeah, I suppose you try not to read things, but it's hard. Earlier on this year, I lost in the semi-final in Vegas in the match play, and had played fantastic all week, was absolutely wrecked, and opened up my phone and there was, oh, this was an awful chip shot, this was pathetic, and this was, and it's one of those things, it's like, I'm disappointed enough, I don't need to read people being critical and whatever online. But at the same time, I suppose it's, if they didn't have a comment or didn't have an opinion, then they didn't care at all. So it's that sort of balance. You want people to be honest and have an opinion, but at the same time, you kind of have to zone in and zone out and not let it affect you too much.
Does it impact you?
Yeah, as a young guy, you know, you're never fully sure of yourself, ever. Like, even, like, you know, the most experienced athletes aren't fully sure of themselves. Even the ones that say they are, I'm convinced that they're not. And so when you see something like that, of course it can affect you in some way. I think I was strong enough to be able to use it to motivate me, rather than going, oh my God, and going in on yourself. And that's the danger with some of the younger guys now, is that you can see them go in on themselves when these sort of negative things start being said. You
always know if you don't play particularly well, people are going to be critical. And I think that was the big thing, even over the last few years, with the whole 20 by 20 movement and sort of female athletes looking for more equality in sport. I think you don't just want lip service from, whether it's the media or whatever. You don't want always the pat on the back, sure, aren't you great? You want to be sort of criticised if you don't do well. And it's one of those things, I suppose, you keep the circle as small as possible and you try to block out any comments that don't come from within that circle. But it doesn't make it any easier if you read it.
You're top 10 athlete. That must come with increased expectation. And obviously comes with more scrutiny and attention. How have you adjusted to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have more expectations on myself than anyone does, and it's a case of managing those expectations, trying to just let it happen when it happens, and knowing that you've the work done and that it will eventually sort of click. And like the Meyer tournament that I won a couple of months ago, I've been second twice, and those experiences got me over the line this year. So it's a case of just challenging them in the right way. We are number one in the world, but like it doesn't make us favourites for the World Cup. It doesn't. You know, there's so many other things that come into it. But you know, we've had some really good stuff over the last couple of years. So again, that belief is sort of on foundations now. We know that we can do it, and now it's just trying to get the best out of ourselves. Trying to get the mentality that like what'll be will be. All we can do is prepare well, give it everything, try our best, and see where that gets us. If we get the best out of ourselves, I'm confident we'll go well. Which is a good place to be. At the time, I was trying to leave Leinster. I was trying to go to every club in the country.
I thought you were going to say Munster there for a second, Johnny.
They didn't want me.